Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Birmingham Business TV. We're coming to you once again from the Liquid Media Centre here in the heart of the city. And Davis, we've got another fantastic show lined up today, haven't we?
Yes, a very, very interesting show we've got lined up today. Great guest on the show, conversation about well-being in the workplace, an interview with an amazing Gen Z entrepreneur, and quite a number of other things. What have you got up to, Carl?
Well, interesting you ask that. We'll be able to see a bit later on when I went up onto the rooftop of a 35-storey skyscraper. I think we can call it a skyscraper if it's 35 stories, can't we? It's one of Birmingham's highest buildings at the top of Broad Street. With some amazing views of the city where we met a panel of power-packed influencers to talk about the property market. So we'll be able to hear and see what happened a little bit later on in the show. Of course, we've got Joel Blake's business show to come as well. We'll have a very special guest in the 90 Seconds with Hot Seat and lots more besides. And what's great, of course, if you've missed anything on any of our previous shows, we're now on YouTube, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely. We're on YouTube. You can find us there and you can make sure that you catch up with any episodes you might have missed.
As ever, anything you think we should be talking about on the show, get in touch with us through any of our channels, info@bbtv.live, or of course, directly through social media. Shall we crack on with the show and meet our first guest?
Yes, it's time. Let's meet our first guest.
Well, I'm delighted to welcome our first guest today. He's a gentleman who wears many different hats. I'm going to call him a Midlands media mogul. Can I call you that?
All different turbans.
Well, that's true. Indeed.
Maybe different turbans.
Linda Johal, great to see you. It's been
Good
a while
afternoon,
since we've sat down and had a natter.
It has been a while.
You run awards events, you dabble in video, in publishing, in all sorts of things. So how do you describe yourself to people?
Yeah, I think people's businesses evolve over time. I think ours has. It started as an events business, then we moved into publishing, then we're in film production because it's part of the events, and now, of course, we're into doing summits. So I suppose over time we've become more of a media company than a production event company. But I think things change, evolve over time, and you roll with the times.
How much of that evolution has been due to what we've all been through the last 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, well, COVID was interesting. So you can imagine during those 2 years, face-to-face events, which is predominantly what we were, came to a stop. We had a big audience we developed over the years across the whole country. How do we communicate with them? Because the biggest threat to us was our brand, because we don't know pre-vaccine whether we'd be out for 4 or 5 years. So we had to plug that gap somehow. And we thought, well, how can we maintain and stay in contact with our, all the audience? And the magazine seemed to be the natural choice. And so we published a magazine, and it's now doing extremely well in America through Barnes & Nobles. I think it's about 800 stores. Then we got a distribution deal in Canada with the biggest bookstores there called Indigo. And we're in negotiation with a couple of distributors here, so step at a time. But of course, what it's done is it's given us what we call an ecosystem. So people can now read about business through the influencer, both digital and physical. They can visit our podcast, so they'll be able to catch this hopefully on our podcast as well. And they can, of course, if you want to touch and feel business, then you come to the events and you can actually meet the people that are in the magazine at the events.
So it's great on a couple of levels, isn't it? In that you launched effectively a new business during lockdown, and you're in a business where people say print and magazines are dead, and they're not, are they? They're not.
Well, this is interesting. So part of entrepreneurship is understanding an opportunity where others don't see it, and then taking not a gamble, but taking a risk assessing, and then saying, right, what are the pluses and minuses of taking a direction that everybody else seems to be vacating. And so that was the gamble. But then, of course, we have a much bigger ecosystem, so we could take that gamble. And interestingly, I think maybe because of COVID, we've got too accustomed to digital and are now fed up of digital and actually want to read something and physically hold it in our hands.
You've had a Zoom meeting.
Yeah. And I think the other thing we also did was, and I suggested to all entrepreneurs, do your research. So we subscribed to every business publication we could find. And there's some fantastic ones, and then we asked ourselves, how can we be different? So we deliberately went upmarket, and our magazine, Carl, believe it or not, in the US is the most expensive magazine on the market.
Is that right?
We are more expensive. We are more expensive than any other magazine. It's selling at $25. That's a lot of money. And so when I spoke to the person who's importing it, they said, firstly, the quality warrants it. Second, the diversity of the content is great. The diversity of the contributors are great. And by the way, it's a British product, they expect to pay more.
Interesting.
So
Because there's a whole new another debate you could have about that, about how sometimes you can price yourself out of the actual quality that you're trying to. You can underprice yourself, and then you're not giving the image. So obviously, as you say, it helps with an ecosystem. You've got your natural awards, local awards coming up in a few days, haven't you?
Yes,
really.
absolutely.
So you're looking very calm. Is it all everything under control?
Well, again, a tip for anybody who's in business is build a good team around you. So they're all feverishly working behind.
Well, you do the showbiz stuff.
Well, yeah, so until I come here, and of course, then the Friday itself, which is the Signature Awards at the Vox, we're expecting up to 600 people.
Excellent.
So it's going to be quite busy on the night. And we've got people coming from all around the country, interestingly. So one of our nominees is a lady who runs a finance company in Glasgow. So
right, so they're not all just Birmingham and Greater Birmingham.
So I said to the Glasgow region, why have you entered the Signature Awards? She said, well, for all intents and purposes, she sees Birmingham as the place to be. So she's flying out to come here. And we get a lot of people from the East Midlands coming into the West. We'll chat about that in a second. We've got certainly a few people come from London who see investment opportunities in Birmingham because that's, it's a city that's on the way up. So we are actually in the hub of enterprise, in the hub of commercial excellence, and in the hub where actually our people are served and skilled by the best world-class universities you can get. And of course, all the universities are going to be in the room. Aston University, UCB are going to be in the room, BCU are going to be in the room. BCU and Aston are sponsors, but they're going to be in the room. So a lot of very talented academics, a lot of very talented universities, and of course, entrepreneurs at the core.
It's interesting because we'll see a bit later in the show what happened earlier this week when I went up to the top of a skyscraper. We did an interview with some property experts on the 35th floor at the Square in Broad Street. And we were talking there about how we need to talk up the strength of this region more. But if you've got people coming down from Glasgow, that's showing the pull of Birmingham and the Greater Birmingham area, isn't it?
And just to give you another, so in June, in the summer, we're planning to do a business and economic summit around the Midlands. And we are expecting at that summit, which will happen locally, a lot of people coming from outside the region and in the region, east and west, who will see the potential of not just the region, but certainly Birmingham at its core.
Which is good to know. Now, I know that having been to some of your awards, which are always fantastic occasions,
Thank you.
That you always like to do a bit of a State of the Nation report about how you see things in the economy. I know you're a very keen, avid reader and student of the economy. So what's on your mind at the moment? What do you think? What are people talking to you about?
Look, I picked up a copy this morning and thought, see what's going on. So a couple of things, I suppose. For the region, particularly the Black Country, manufacturing is core. And one of the things that's really hit the region of Black Country has been energy prices. So it was interesting to listen this morning, a leaked plan to disaggregate the Department of Business and actually have a minister responsible just for energy. And I think...
Do you see that as a good thing for the region?
I think so. Firstly, it emphasises the role of energy in everyday life. So I think that's the one thing. And the second thing, I think the Ukraine situation has sort of illustrated how vulnerable we are to energy. And of course, the long-term criticism of all governments, irrespective blue or red, is that they've never really had a long-term energy strategy. And maybe this is the time to do it. And so I'm pleased, both for the UK, I'm pleased for the region, but particularly in the Black Country where we do rely, when it comes from manufacturing, lots and lots of energy. So I think that's I think is a great move, if it transpires from what we're hearing.
What are you hearing from businesses about just how much they're struggling or otherwise to cope with the the rate of escalation of energy at the moment?
Listen, I've heard people have said to me that they're thinking of shutting shop because the acceleration has just been ridiculous. So we're talking about people sometimes paying $2,500 per month, now being asked to pay 20, and that just makes it unviable. So I know there's been help in the short term for businesses, but I think we do need a long-term solution to this. Because if Ukraine's one example, there may be others to come that we don't see, and we're hearing rumours about where other pinch points could be.
Absolutely. Well, it makes you analyse every tiny little bit of where you might have a weak point, doesn't it? So.
Yeah, and of course, as businesses, we all stress test. But now it's making, and certainly as somebody in the events production business, we always wonder when the next COVID's coming. So you do start to think about the things that you would have never, ever thought of, but that's part of business.
I guess the other thing, though, during COVID, a lot of businesses who maybe thought there was only one way that they could do something have realised that that's not true, isn't it? That you get round things, you find a way, don't you?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, most entrepreneurs are used to daily challenges, daily changes, and they're programmed to find solutions. And that's the way forward. And the more successful ones are the ones who anticipate problems and create opportunities for themselves. And of course, for some people, a crisis is a great place to opportunity and take an opportunity.
Some people have made money out of it, haven't they? No doubt about it.
Lots of money. And then, of course, unfortunately, some who were totally dependent. So it was interesting when the whole thing happened. You know, we started to question, crikey, where could this take us? And we stress tested, and we were okay for a couple of years. But the worry was, as I said earlier, the worry was the brand, whether the brand would then become obsolete by the time we'd come back.
Have you found now, though, I mean, I guess maybe this year is probably going to be the first normal year since the COVID outbreak first started, that there's a real appetite for people who want to get back out and about, to awards events, to conferences, to sort of network with people and celebrate and remind people that it's back.
Well, so absolutely. So we've always been, and I did it when I was president of the Chamber of Commerce, I always thought there was, at that time, back in 2015, I thought there was a vacuum when it came to celebrating business, which is why I set about doing the Signature Awards around the country. And because I think for too often, entrepreneurs themselves forget how brilliant they are. And certainly the point is that without entrepreneurs, we wouldn't have the bedrock of economic growth. And we heard about all these strikes and things happening. Well, the money's got to come from somewhere, and generally speaking, it's from business, because they employ the people who also pay the tax. So I think we do need to take out time. And just interestingly, our sales of the magazine in America are really flying. And I do wonder, when we do the negotiations in England or the UK, actually where there's the same appetite for entrepreneurial magazines, and this will be a telling sign.
It's a different mindset, isn't it?
It's a different mindset. So, so it'll be an interesting exercise just to see how well the magazine does here compared to the States where it's flying.
Do you think that's to do with the fact that maybe sometimes, us Brits, us reserved Brits, we don't feel quite so confident boasting about how maybe we've done something well, do we?
Well, I was talking to somebody who works for me in the States, looking after the brand, and she does regularly accuse me, of downplaying what we do. And she said, look, they just don't do it like this in America. They go the other way. And she said, you're just far too reserved. And it's difficult. It's difficult because we like to say it as it is rather than what it might be.
Now, it's up on my skyscraper, as I said, that we'll see a bit, not my skyscraper, the skyscraper, that we'll see a bit later on, saw the fantastic panoramic views of Birmingham, including, you could see the route where HS2 is going to be coming into town. What are you hearing about that? How are you feeling about that? Well, I mean, there's been it's never been really out of the headlines in the last 5 years.
Look, it's interesting. I mean, I've just take that here. So the HS2 cuts threaten to slash route and add delays. I think it's a brilliant idea, by the way. I think we need, if you travel around Europe, if you see how good and how well their trains run, we are miles behind. And of course, the last time we've had any kind of innovation was going back to when the trains first started. And I remember I read somewhere that the people at the time said, well, what the hell's this? We're fine with a horse and cart. So, you have to move on. You have to move and prepare for the century in front of us. So I think, and of course, what hasn't helped now is because of COVID, the supply chain and prices have skyrocketed. And of course, cost of living has gone up. And that's made suddenly the projections, which I'm sure they never thought would happen, it's made it even higher. But I think with everything, this is not just for us, this will be for generations to come. And I think when you assess the viability of a project, you don't assess it in a finite time. You say, well, actually, its benefits will continue to deliver, I don't know, 50 years, 70 years. And it's over 70 years, I think you amortize, that they call it, the cost, and say, well, actually, for the next 70 years, this will be worth it. But if it doesn't end up finishing at Central London, what it should, I think that'll be a big mistake.
It's got to be all or nothing, isn't it?
It's got to be all or nothing. Yeah. And if you ask most entrepreneurs, they go for all and hope it works, but generally it does. But you've got to go big. You've got to have that positive mindset, and you've got to say, look, whatever it may come, it may hurt us in the short term, but long term, it'll be great for the country. So for us in the Midlands here, we're at the heart of it. And so for us, it's important that it goes both ways.
I was talking to Lord Digby Jones on the show last month
Yeah.
About HS2, and his argument was it shouldn't have come from London upwards. It should have come from the north downwards instead. And you know, his argument was that those are the priorities from a connectivity and a speed point of view.
I think from a levelling up perspective, absolutely. It's you know, if you want to level up, then you want the north. Listen, we could be greedy here. We want both. We want up north and we want down south, and we want both. So for us, if we were to be greedy, we want both. And I think if you want a truly connected country, and if you want levelling up to go right across the country, you do need to connect the north, the middle, and London. And you know, you can't have a go at London and say, well, look, they've got everything already. We should all benefit. Don't take things away from London just to give to us in the north. They should continue to do what they do, and we should continue to do it, and we should all be flourishing. Let's not play the competitive game. So I'm not at all questioning what Digby's saying. I think we should have both.
Well, as you say earlier, if you've got people coming down from Glasgow for your awards, it shows just how transient the economy is and the business community is.
I think the other thing is business people and businesses and entrepreneurs don't see geographical boundaries.
Yeah.
So I think what we should as a country is not look at North and London as competition. We should be looking at Bangladesh, China and India as competition. So how can we move goods and people, increase our productivity up and down the UK so that we can compete with people from the East? And that's where the battle is. And I think that's how and if you look at China, I think their infrastructure is superb, the way they move things around. And that's the kind of level we should be getting to. Yeah. So that's my sort of belief in HS2.
And it's also the competition, isn't it? You know, it's a global market, isn't it? It's a global
market.
world. So how are you generally feeling then about 2023? A lot of the headlines are trying to, you know, talk about the fact interest rates have gone up for 10 months in a row, things are hard, everybody's struggling, everybody's worried about how much they're spending. Are you feeling more optimistic now than you were at the start of the year?
Okay, so let me take you back to 2020. And everybody said this is the roaring 20s. I remember that was the word flying around, the roaring 20s. March 2020 changed all that. And I think we went through a health crisis, a major health crisis, then had economic effects. Where do I see? I think it's going to be bunkers down for the next 12 months. But the general commentators are saying inflation is going to dramatically drop. And if that dramatically drops, it'd be interesting what they do with interest rates. Do they then say, well, actually, inflation's under control, we can now drop interest rates? If they drop that, then we're on our way to recovery. We've just got to hold our nerve. And if, you know, I was talking to Roy Richardson, and he reminds me that in the 70s and 80s, we had interest rates of 15%. And of course, some economists will tell you, our natural level of interest rates should be around 4 or 5.
It's about what we're at now, isn't it?
What we are now. So really, we've been fortunate that we've enjoyed an unprecedented rate of interest rates. Have been incredibly low. And of course, when it was incredibly low, people still moaned it was too high. So I think there is a bit of context here. We've got to look at it. And my understanding is that we will look for it to fall eventually to 2 to 3% back to where we are. You've just got to knuckle down. You've just got to work hard, focus. And to me, I think the picture is very, very good going forward.
One thing's for certain, though, Linda, when interest rates are going up or down, the savings rates always come down more quickly than they go up, don't they?
Yeah, well, I think the least we say about that, it's no different to energy prices.
That's right. Yeah.
You hear the energy prices globally, the markets go down, but the petrol pump doesn't seem to move much.
No.
And no electric costs. So, yeah, they're a bit slow in passing down the savings, but very quick to hike it up. Yeah. So, yeah, listen, I'm not going to argue with that.
There's a bit of margin somewhere in there, isn't
yes,
there?
yes.
Listen, great. Good luck with your awards.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll be waiting to hear about all the winners and some fabulous celebrations. Even though you've got people coming from all over the world, I'm sure there'll be a healthy proportion of great West Midlands entrepreneurs on display.
Well, listen, it's great pride to me that all these people are coming into Birmingham. We're generating the local economy. We're putting Birmingham on the map. We've got Manchester. A lot of people coming from Manchester because we're going to Manchester to do our awards. A lot of people come from Manchester, a lot from London, and as I said, from Glasgow. And we've got a couple of people, if I remember now, coming from Delhi as well. So it's all good, exciting times. But at the core of it is we've got to celebrate the brilliant entrepreneurs we have here in the region and UK.
And I know for a fact that that's exactly what you like doing. So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming in. It's always great to see you.
Cheers.
This is Birmingham Business TV coming to you from the Liquid Media Centre in Birmingham. Don't forget, if you've missed any of the interviews we've done on previous shows, you can catch our YouTube channel. You can binge watch the box set on there. Joel Blake Business Show is coming up in a few minutes' time. First, though, here's Henry Carpenter with some news headlines.
Financial services firm Deloitte has this week released its latest Birmingham Crane Survey, revealing that 2022 saw construction activity continue to set new records and developer confidence remain upbeat. The year saw the city break its own record for the number of new residential homes delivered onto the market, 2,398, compared to the previous record of 2,072 set in 2020. Venture capitalists Midven have invested £1 million in Talkout, a Birmingham-based knowledge and experience platform. Talkout's platform, Realise, incorporates a social engine and AI-powered learning assistant, and the company can boast a blue-chip customer base, which already includes Halfords and Pets at Home. Birmingham's Colmore Bid has launched a free upskilling programme to teach businesses and individuals life-saving personal safety skills. The 90-minute programme will explore how to use medical tools such as bleed kits and defibrillators in times of need.
So welcome to this year's first edition of the Joel Blake Business Show here on Bbtv.live. My name is Joel Blake and I'm the host of the show, and today we have an absolutely amazing panel to talk about an amazing subject. Today we're going to be talking about ESG. We're going to be talking about what it is, why is it so important, how can businesses take practical action in order to add value to both their businesses, communities and wider society. And on the panel today are leaders in their own right who are going to share some amazing insights and expertise in this area. And so first I'd like to introduce Manel Partner. Manel is the co-founder and CEO of Wellspace Architects. We have Di Vernon MBE, who's the founder and CEO of Employability UK. And we have Carl George MBE, Head of Governance at RSM. Thank you very much for joining me today. How are you all?
Very well, thank you.
Good, good. You have a nice Christmas, nice New Year. Well, we're in February now, so it's kind of
That's long past.
But we always say, like, if you only see someone for the first time in the new year, always say Happy New Year. So very belated Happy New Year to you. And what a year it's been, hasn't it, in terms of this whole aspect of business support, business needs, business growth, the contribution that businesses make, and indeed in the world of ESG. And obviously we're going to be talking about that today, and we're going to be talking about it from a practical point of view. You know, our businesses out there, many of them have an understanding, may not have an understanding. And so what I'd really like to do today is just really get inside of your minds, really, to share some insight for our audience. And so, Carl, I'd like to start with you, if I could, in terms of what is ESG? You know, we hear this acronym bandied about everywhere in government, TV, media, but what is ESG and why is it important?
It's really important because it starts back with, remember CSR we used to talk about back in the day, corporate social responsibility. And if we take it right back to Kofi Annan from the United Nations, a report that he had heard talked about environment, social and governance. How we look at managing the reporting of organisations, not just from a financial perspective, but all the other things that make up what a successful company is. So we can look at the bottom line, profit, and we can say an organisation successful, or we can look broader than that, as John Elkington said, people, planet and profits. And I'll quickly, before I get onto ESG, talk to you about the area that I'm interested in the ESG, which is the corporate governance bit. So I'll talk to you about governance codes. So it was in South Africa that we had a governance code by Professor Mervyn King, which talks about people, planet and prosperity. So I'd say ESG is CSR souped up, is one way of looking at it. And on the environment, we talk about net zero, we talk about carbon reduction. Under the S of social, we talk about people, well-being, making sure we've got supply chains. And under the governance space, we want to make sure that's the glue that pulls all of the other areas together collectively. So perhaps if Kofi Annan and the original author of that report 10, 15 years ago had thought about it, they may not have had the G in the acronym, because the G is more of the glue that brings the E and the S together. But I'll tell you some practical things later on.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, because I think the foundation of any business is great governance, but the drivers of any business is its people. And I think, Diane, in terms of your work at Employability UK and your focus on the social aspects of ESG, what has been your experience of that, and what have you seen in terms of how organisations are or are not really delivering on that?
I think that, that there's a common misconception around social in terms of social mobility, in particular social capital, because I think a lot of people believe that everything starts at the recruitment process into a business, and that is the gateway where it starts to matter. I think it happens long before then. I think it's around brand. I think so many people feel excluded from opportunities because they wonder whether they fit. Are they good enough? Are they bright enough? Do they dress well enough? Are they what's needed? And those conceptions and preconceptions and beliefs can prove to be such barriers to otherwise very capable talent, and businesses are potentially missing out because they don't actually realise what the perceptions are of their future workforce. And that isn't just young people, it's particularly at the moment 50 plus. People are increasingly becoming nervous about their worth, their value, what can they bring to businesses, and there's a growing, particularly post-pandemic, lack of self-confidence and self-belief, and that translates then into other issues such as mental health and so on. So I think it's absolutely huge, and it's something that really needs tackling.
I think, and we'll come to some of those points, because I think, you know, linking back just to what Carl was saying in terms of the glue, you know, people are the glue, and so if people are not feeling correct and they're not feeling that they can be productive, they're not feeling that they can be their best selves, that's going to have an impact on business, which I know for you, Manel, is a very clear area, you know, the well-being of individuals. You know, how are you seeing the kind of, I guess, the E from a well-being point of view in terms of the aspect there?
Yeah, I think the environmental aspect is really, really important on how you feel emotionally, physically, mentally, and I think that, you know, from a well-being perspective, it's understanding your environment. Why are you here? What are you doing here? What functions are you going to be doing? Are you happy doing those functions? It's the culture of a business that brings that drive and motivation, and that's, I suppose, touching upon Diane's view as well of it's not just about employability, it's about the core culture of a business and how they communicate that to the people, but also to the environment. If you take, for example, an office building, you've got to be able to communicate in that. Office buildings have changed since the pandemic, how we use them, why are we going into the office, why are we not just working from home, and also that element of, yes, we've got hybrid working now, and obviously that has a good impact on CO2 and emissions, but how does that really impact people? Because, you know, if you're working from home, it can be quite isolating. If you're not communicating and engaging, I mean, as human beings, we're very much social characters. We have to engage with other communities, other neighbourhoods, different types of people as well, to bring innovation and develop businesses. So it's not just about, you know, who you're employing. You've got to understand why you're employing them. Are you going to be able to do innovation? And from an environmental aspect, if you're designing an office building, as I might be doing, whether that's a large corporate building or whether that's for SME businesses such as ourselves, the core element to understanding that is, why are we doing this? How can we reduce energy consumption and operational costs, for example? So there's three main elements that we look at when we do the design.
And I'm going to ask you to hold on that, because I want to come to that. And the reason why I'd like to hold you on that, because you mentioned something which is really, really important. I think is a clear strand all the way through, and that's the culture. Yeah. You know, the culture of the organisation, the culture of the people, and how good governance actually creates a positive culture. I mean, what are your views on culture generally in terms of business at the moment? You know, we're in challenging times for businesses, and it's often difficult to keep that culture. You know, you talked about hybrid, you talked about people coming together, you talked about, you know, older workers versus younger workers, and you've talked about good governance that brings people all together. But what are we seeing in terms of the culture of Birmingham at the moment, in terms of the business community, and what's any of your views on that?
I don't mind starting on from a governance perspective. When I talk about culture, we say to people, "Do as I say and not as I do." And I always say this to people: if you've got children, does that work? and Bob Garrett's book says the fish rots from the head. It's not a fishing book; it's a book about corporate governance. And the reason I mention that because I think the culture comes from the leadership. Whenever I go into an organisation to determine what culture is going to be like, I really want to understand what's happening in the boardroom, what's happening in the leadership. And as I make my diagnostic assessment, for the want of a better expression, as I look at what they're doing there, if you practice what you preach, what you do speaks more eloquently than anything you'll ever say. So it isn't about the policies are important. It isn't about just the policies. It's about what we're actually doing. This is the way we do it here. And as you talk about Birmingham and talk about the businesses in Birmingham, my perspective comes from looking at the leadership, looking at those boards, looking at what they're doing, what they're saying, and how they're making sure it filters throughout the whole organisation. So that's how the governance kind of fits in. And some of the practice that you were mentioning, I think that was really interesting, because a lot of the measures that we get through ESG are because of the E standards that we're asked to measure a performance against for the financial services sector. It's the investors, it's the funders who are saying you've got to hit these standards. But it's the culture that's going to make us do it when you don't have those standards that you have to hit.
Absolutely.
It's we care about this. There's some kind of empathy to make sure we're hitting those standards.
Now, and I hear that, Carl, but I think, and I'd like to come to you on this, because let's take the plaster off this a little bit, because we can be all, I guess, nice and fluffy about the Birmingham business community is all great and it's all lovely. The reality is that there are still levels of depravity in our city. There are still challenges for talent to get into the boardroom, as you know, Carl, with some of your work that you've done on the race code, for example, and how effective that's been. But Di, in terms of what you're seeing in terms of actual employability practice, the ability for businesses to truly embrace their own vulnerability as organisations, and leaders in those organisations being able to embrace their vulnerability. What are you seeing in that regard? Because in my world, when I'm moving around kind of financial inclusion within some of these spaces, and in particular financial services, you see one thing and you hear another. How do you see it?
I think you're quite right, and also what Carl says about the leadership. I think leaders do not always realise just how much they're not hearing, and there's a lot that's going on that's shaping culture and mindsets and thought processes that are influencing outcomes and hiring decisions, recruitment decisions, and the way people behave. It's not just about getting in, it's about getting on. And people need to feel that they can do that, particularly in this hybrid situation, which I think, as was mentioned earlier, that has really added an extra complexity to an already difficult situation. So for me, for leaders in particular, it's about not just hearing and finding out, fact-finding, it's listening and acting upon what's being said and how people feel, because behaviours and feelings and emotions must never be underestimated in the impact it can have on a business's actual success in a city. And I think Birmingham has a fabulous opportunity post-Commonwealth Games, the investment that's going into the city, the new businesses that are moving here. It is an absolute golden opportunity for the businesses in Birmingham to really unite and stand firm and say, we are leading on this, we are listening, we already have a fantastic platform and we are going to use it to drive business forward.
But do you think the business community is actually serious around ESG and what it can actually do and what it actually means long term for the benefits of all? Or do you think there's maybe a lack of understanding to a degree?
I think there will always be a lack of understanding, because an understanding will change dependent upon the dynamics that are going on, and what is important in terms of priorities to a business today may not be the same in 6 months' time for lots of different reasons, and we know that there are things that influence that way outside the region's remit globally, influences that are going to happen. you know, the fact that businesses are really struggling to attract the right talent. There is a perception that maybe CSR and outreach is something that's a nice to have rather than an essential, which I disagree with. I think it's really, really important for businesses to be seen and heard as part of the community and influential in giving opportunities, particularly for young people. And by that I mean, in particular, 30 and under, not 16 to 18-year-olds, because everybody thinks, oh, well, we've got to give the young people a chance. Yes, we have, of course we have, but it doesn't stop there.
Which is a really good point, actually, and if I can come to you, Manal, in terms of that kind of age gap, or age group, I should say, sorry, and the potential gaps in businesses because they're not attracting the right talent in that age group. How is the hybrid world of work affecting the ability to support that particular age group of 30 and under?
Well, I think we all learn from each other, and if we're not in an environment where we're connected, we're not supporting young people effectively, so they're not able to learn, able to get that right level of experience to be able to function in that job role, for example, or that environment that they need to be developed for. So it's, I think that connection between environment and people is really, really important. It's the key aspect. Isolation is a big element in society, especially with young people with anxiety and depression, and being able to be supported with that, whether that's at work or whether that's at home, is empowering them, being able to develop, to learn skills that they need, because just from our own experiences as a young architectural practice, we equally find there is a gap between support that's needed after you're graduated from university all the way through to getting that experience. We can't find the right talent ourselves, but that's not because we haven't got the culture in. We need to be able to support those young people effectively, and have the right resources in a business as well. And sometimes, again, investment and cost can be a barrier to that, but it's looking at it proactively and saying, well, what are we going to you know, if we invest in this, what are we going to get out of this in the future?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing loud and clear is this importance of people time and time again. It's the right people in the right way. It's about being able to get them at grassroots right through and having a real clear pattern of support for them in order to become leaders in the organisation. But I still feel there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And I guess, Carl, in your work that you've done around the race code, I guess you might have seen that too in terms of diverse leadership within the boardroom, within the executive teams, senior management teams. I mean, what are your views on the need for more diverse leadership itself in the city, but maybe outside as well?
Yeah, and just before I tackle that directly, just following on from our conversation earlier, I think depending on the size of business, depending on where they are, the strategy that they have to implement some of these practices and how to make it practical. And I say that the first level is this compliance stroke legal compliance. So Equality Act or modern slavery or whatever the legislation might be, organisations will first try and make sure we're hitting that particular standard. They'll move past legal, in my opinion, into this is the right thing or moral thing to do. So organisations might start to say, actually, we're doing this because this makes us feel better. Where we are, or where we should be, however, is not legal. It's not nice to do. This is about competitiveness. This is about getting the best people. This is about talent management. This is about making sure we are the best we can be. So when we understand the journey that organisations are on, and sometimes it isn't about the compliance, because we should have done that by now, and it isn't about moral or nice thing to do, or tokenism. This is really about getting the best people. So if I take that as the background to the work I do in leadership, when I see underrepresentation in the boardroom and senior leadership team, whether it be age, we talked about age, whether it be gender, and now I look at ethnicity, cognitive diversity and social mobility. And what we see in the boardroom is a group of people who are very similar in age, in experience, in background. And if we don't tackle that diversity in the leadership across the private, the public and the voluntary sector, we will get groupthink, we will get things doing, not working outside of the box and outside of your comfort zone, and we won't get the best talent. So that's really where I wanted to make sure we're thinking about.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And I think that word competitiveness, I think it's often, you know, used and thrown around in our city a lot of the time, but I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. It's not, ESG is not about compliance alone. It's not about just making sure you've got the best talent alone. It's not about making sure you've got the right environments for people to work in or indeed contribute to in terms of the wider society. It is about being a competitive organisation that through its delivery of work can add value in more than just profitable bottom lines for commercial returns. It is about giving back. I think, you know, it's funny, you started off, Carl, talking about CSR and this being an evolution of CSR. And as we all know, CSR in this city has been something that has been truly supported by the business community. Yet, I know from my particular background of work over the last 20 years in some of that space, it's not been as consistent. There are still challenges for talent to come into the city in particular, when talent could be 20 minutes away, but they still feel that this isn't a place for them sometimes. And I think sometimes organisations need to go where the talent is and really get an understanding of what and how that talent can be nurtured and feel comfortable to come into some of the spaces in order for organisations to be competitive for the long term. And I think from what I've heard from both of yourselves in particular, Diane and Manel, this whole sense of creating the right environment for talent at any age to feel that it can foster and grow and be nurtured effectively is going to help with contribution long term. But you also need a great level of governance and policies and systems and process and culture, which ought to be a given, should it not?
Yeah, it should be a holistic approach to, you know, it's not this or this or this, it's all together. And I think businesses need to start looking at it in a holistic way to say, this is the core of my business, or this is the importance of why I am in existence as a small SME, or whether that's a corporate. Obviously, it's harder and more challenging to change culture in a larger institution than it is from, say, a small business. There's more adaptability there, but you've got to start somewhere. And like Diane mentioned as well, the listening to people of varied cultural backgrounds, varied disciplines, varied types of people will allow you to innovate and bring that new way of thinking forward as the mainstream, because that's what needs to happen.
Isn't it interesting that, you know, this whole concept of EDI and diversity and inclusion seems to really be sitting at the heart of what ESG really means.
Yeah.
When you think about kind of diversity in all its forms, ESG, again, I'd take on board what you said, Carl, as an evolution of CSR, but ESG is almost the new way of being diverse, but not from a tokenistic greenwashing point of view, but more from a viewpoint that it actually makes absolute business sense and people sense and societal sense to be as diverse as you can, to embrace diversity as much as possible, but more importantly, take action on the back of that. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I see, again, particularly from my technology space of work, is innovation is coming into this space more and more, but the innovation is being created and designed by the very people who created, as you said earlier, Carl, this idea of groupthink and biases. So the innovation itself is not in itself changing anything.
Well, is that even innovation? We've got to question ourselves, don't we, really?
Exactly. and I guess, Carl, just come back to yourself again. I mean, surely, I know within your work at RSM, you know, you talk a lot with your clients around technology and kind of the next wave of, you know, technology innovations. You know, how are you seeing that from an ESG point of view in terms of how you support other organisations? And then, Dia, maybe come to you in terms of how you're seeing technology helping the next generation of talent coming through as well. But Carl, if I can come to you first.
And this will probably date when this is being aired, because we talk about chat GPT and the technology that's out there is just amazing. I asked it, what do you know about corporate governance? And it said, this is what I know about the key issues. up to 2021, because that's all it knew. Obviously, we know a bit more because I've been talking about it after 2021. And then you can go a little bit deeper to then say, well, if those are the key issues, why? And you can have, with a artificial intelligence platform, a really good discussion about the things that should be coming up in the boardroom.
Is that scary though?
It is.
Technology itself is telling you.
I remember years ago, there was the world's first robot citizen, Sophia, in Saudi Arabia. And I see us being able to use technology, not to give us the answer, because it's holding the whole internet, but we use that technology to have greater discussions amongst ourselves. And an enabler, as you said, to make sure we're getting things right and making sure we can get to the data. Because within minutes of me asking, it's already putting the answer. So we can use that technology on demand. And this fourth industrial revolution, this Professor Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum says the Internet of Things is changing the way the world's going to work. And I think it's even the intelligence of things. So it's not just the internet connecting things, but it's those things can think and then connect to each other. And then we've got a whole new world to look forward to, which is an opportunity, which is exciting. And this is what I think is we should be thinking about in this space.
Absolutely.
Where it's an opportunity, bringing people in. The thing that I think, and I shouldn't be ageist, but the thing that I'm thinking is really important there's a generation of people that are not in the boardroom that have grown up with this technology. And I give an example of my son in a meeting, and I'm telling him off for being on his phone, and he's answered the question that I asked about some new polling thing, sent me the email, set up the platform whilst we're in a meeting, because the next generation are doing 2 or 3 things at once.
Yeah, and it's normal to them.
And even, and I'm going to be sexist now, but I'm going to say, because even a man is multitasking.
Well, again, the technology, it's fascinating. As I say, that's my day-to-day space, and I totally agree on all that. I mean, we use ChatGPT in our business now, and it's like, okay, what's going to happen 10, 15 years from now? But in terms of young people and talent and the next generation, I mean, what are you seeing from your perspective in relation to that?
It's fascinating, isn't it? And I think that the way we interview people, the way we select and everything at Employability UK, what we try and do is prepare young people for an experience, whatever that may be, and literally say to them, it could be that you're going to be sitting across the table from a real person, but it may not, because before you even get into that place, you may have to, and it's very common, increasingly common, that organisations are using AI to sift job applications, CVs. So the key words are more and more important, and the young people know it. It's all very well thinking, yes, I know how to use this phone, this tablet, this piece of technology. I'm very trendy and up to date because I know exactly how to use all this stuff. What they're not so certain of is how that is being implemented in ways that they're not so familiar with, because, for instance, if an organisation says, well, we actually want you to follow this link, go online, go onto and do this, and this. And if you pass that, you go to the next stage. That, digital poverty, all the issues around that, nervousness, self-belief, capability. Then there's people who cannot, for whatever reason, use the technology to its greater extent. So what are we doing? Are we recruiting for skilled people who are very well versed and had great opportunities in a social mobility setting because they've been on the tech since they were 2 years old? Are we then excluding those that maybe don't have that exposure, that knowledge and experience and that personal affinity with the use of tech to even get past the first post of the recruitment process?
Very interesting. The need for balance is crucial as we move forward. Well, as we begin to kind of sum up for today's episode, I'd like you all to kind of think about maybe a practical insight or maybe a practical advice you can give to maybe our viewers and the businesses who are watching around how they can implement good ESG practices within their organisation, maybe from your areas of expertise or just generally collectively what you think that might be. But as you're thinking about that, I think what I'm hearing is the importance of the 3 elements, but also there are layers below that need to be really taken care of: the culture, the actual people themselves, the ability to make the best use of technology and innovation to make sure you're supporting the first two, but also making sure that you are looking at ESG from a holistic point of view and making sure that no matter what you're doing, you've got the right leadership at the head who's really driving that change. And then with that comes effective governance, etc., around some of that. I think overall, one of the biggest challenges we've got though in our region is to not only take the action, but to measure the impact of that action and to be able to put in place the intelligence that we generate from that for the long term. Our city is ever changing, the demographics is ever changing, the types of businesses ever changing, the impact of technology in businesses is changing all sectors. You know, if you look at some of the traditional sectors in the region, many of them are now being affected by technology in ways that they didn't even think about. So I think we're at a time where, and you said it earlier, Carl, you know, we do have the opportunity now, but it's how do we as a region come together to kind of grasp that opportunity for the benefit of our businesses, but more importantly for the benefit for our communities and societies that we're all here to serve. And that's a challenge I will put out to the business community any day of the week, because if we don't do that, then we're going to have the same conversations that we've been having for 20, 30 years in this region, and longer in some aspects. So I guess just in finishing off, you want to maybe just share a practical thing that you think businesses could do from your area of work, or just generally to make ESG really, really work for them?
So in our business and my career path, I'm something called a WELL AP, which is a WELL accredited professional, and the WELL is a building standard that helps from a social aspect, an environmental aspect in some instances, and a governance aspects. And there's about over 100 features that you can look at, which you can implement within your environment that will help you to lead on culture. It will help you to proactively measure the implementation that you're putting in, and it will help you to recruit the right talent, help with productivity and motivation, and that's the core element of a business that we should be trying to measure. How are we doing, as well as putting these tick box things into place, but how is this helping us? And you know, there's research out there and there's case studies out there that help to look at the ROI against these implementations, and businesses are being more sturdy, more empowered by the fact that these processes and elements are being put into place. So I would say that is a starting point, perhaps, to start looking at where to begin and helping these businesses to then progress and develop a culture. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Di?
Yeah, I would go back to what I said originally about brand perception, the great place to work. Young people in particular, I think, are becoming more and more discriminate about who they apply to and why. The decision-making process isn't any longer about just salary terms and conditions. It's far more than that. People want to feel comfortable with the values and the authenticity of a business. They want to see how that business conducts itself within the community, within the space that's important to them. So I think it's about accessibility and perception and really listening and staying current in the thinking, as well as focusing on the competitiveness and all the things that businesses spend their time having to do as well. Obviously, governance and compliance, hugely important, but that again fits into the authenticity basket for young people. Are these people ethical? Are they doing the right thing by themselves and others?
Okay.
So it's just remembering that.
So brand perception and basically living your truth, being the authentic
Living the
organisation
values.
that you say you are, living your values. Excellent. And Carl?
Yeah, I think I will conclude in the G of ESG, but first saying that governance is more than compliance. So practically, if organisations can understand that governance can be an enabler, it doesn't have to be about bureaucracy, it doesn't have to be about a hindrance to getting best practice. And if you can align PVSC, purpose, so here's the practical thing, every organisation, we have to understand what our purpose is, align that with the strategy, get the values right, which will lead to the right culture. If we can align all of that, then we've got some way of working towards. So I'll conclude with saying PVSC, purpose, strategy, value, culture, align them, and we've got somewhere of going practically.
Fantastic. I like that. That's really nice, actually. So I just want to say thank you to our audience for watching today's episode. You've heard some great insight from our leaders from across the city about ESG. I think the biggest thing that's coming out of the conversation today is the importance of people. We sometimes can get so sucked into the day-to-day challenges of running a business that we actually forget about the environment, the culture, the support, the enablement for our people to become the best that they can be. Without people, we will never be successful. But it's about the type of people too. It's about creating cultural organizations that allow the diversity of people to come in, to enable that diversity to really prosper, to grow, and to do the best that they can be, and be the best they can be, to do the best that they can in order to help themselves and the organizations to scale. And I think if we can do that collectively as a region, you know, the world is our oyster. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you very much.
Are you looking to increase your clients, finance, and networks? The Growth Hub can help you. Best of all, you don't have to pay for a single thing. We're a free service.
I could describe the Growth Hub in a few words, such as imperative, excellent, and extremely helpful. I think any entrepreneur, any managing director would really benefit from using the Growth Hub to drive their business forward.
We have expert business advice. Our expert advisors have the tools to help you, whether you're a small or medium business. The people you'll speak to are experienced business people themselves, who can give you effective and analytical advice on your business firsthand.
Some of the support that we offer as a Growth Hub to SMEs, such as Rob's, can range from anything from access to finance, sales, marketing, and in particular an IP review in conjunction with the IPO.
From skills to business support and sustainability, no matter where you are on your entrepreneurial journey, we're here for you. Whatever your industry, whatever your sector, we find solutions for your business challenges. Grow your business and make it as successful as it can be. And all this for free. Make sure your business doesn't miss out. Visit our website for more information and to contact us.
There is a lot of conversation around Gen Z entrepreneurs, and whatever it is that you believe about those narratives, we'll leave that to you. However, one thing is for sure, they are excellent entrepreneurs across every age group. Today, I'm in conversation with one of the remarkable young entrepreneurs of the city of Birmingham, Amani Zubair, who is the founder of Trezor, and interestingly, she's got Lord Sugar as a business partner. Amani, you're welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I look forward to a conversation because it's quite exciting. So first of all, before we get into the nitty-gritty stuff, tell us a bit about yourself. How has your journey evolved and what is it that you do primarily?
So I am a jewellery business owner and I started Trezor from my bedroom when I was 17. And it was very different to what I have now. The jewellery was not the same, but I was very inspired by my South Asian culture. And I really loved gold. And I think it's something that is important to most people of colour. We all kind of grow up with gold being gifted to us or being a big part of our culture, the way we look, the way we are, our history. So for me, I loved seeing like my grandmother's gold bangles and things like that. But I was 17, I was not allowed to leave the house in real gold jewellery. I wasn't trusted, they wouldn't let it happen. And I really wanted to bring something to market that looked exactly like that, felt like that, gave you that luxurious feel, but so that people like me could afford and could also, you know, walk around with and like be safe, you know?
So that's how the business Trezor was born.
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. That's how Trezor was born. And it's evolved a lot over the years. Like it's coming on to 4 years since I started now.
So you've been an entrepreneur for 4 years. Talk to me about the evolution of that business. So what did it start as? Where were you selling? Were you going to stores? Was this online? And what is it today?
Yeah, so I would say probably for a bit longer than that. Before I did Trezor, my thing was I was website designing and I was also reselling clothes on Depop, and that's how I got the money to start Trezor in the first place. But with Trezor, it was always online straight away because I knew that was where I wanted to be. I really wanted to position myself in a place where I could.
Natural.
Yeah, it felt natural. Like I really wanted to be where it sounds silly, but like, you know, where the lazy option was, like, I don't want to stand up in a shop all day and sell the jewelry. Like, I wanted to figure out what can I do that is low effort. At the time, you think it's low effort. It's not, but you know, low effort. Well, what feels like low effort, and kind of what I can do from being sat in my bedroom, and that's kind of why I chose to go down the online route.
And that's quite interesting because I mean, I pick up from one of the words that used that something that felt easy, something that felt natural, a bit of low effort.
Yeah.
And that feeds into this narrative that is out there in the public domain about the Gen Z generation.
Yeah.
These are young people, you know, they could care less about nothing, you know, they don't want to do anything. There's so many things out there, some positive, some negative. What have you heard? What is true and what is that's not right?
So I know there's a lot of kind of, do you know what? I don't think it's a thing against Gen Z. I think we're one of the younger generations, and typically your older generations look at you guys like, oh, you young people, like you do things a completely different way. And because we do things in a totally different way, that's not natural to you, like your gen or even the gen above you, it can look like, okay, actually that's just lazy, but it's not. It's like work smart, not hard, you know? We don't want to work hard, but we still want good things. And there are ways around that. I think this you know, for my parents' generation, it was study, go to work all day, work long hours, be a lawyer, be a doctor, like that kind of thing. And for us, it's like we have so much choice now, so much choice that we can do anything. So I get why it can seem that, you know, we're the lazier generation, but I don't think it's that much of a bad thing.
And it's quite interesting, right? Because you reference so much choice. And I think that that's where it comes from. There's a lot of choice, there's a lot of option, and I think in previous generations, there was one way to do it.
Yeah.
You know, you study hard, and then if you choose to start a business, you learn the space, you begin to build gradually. But in today's day and age, with the advantages that technology gives us,
Yeah.
there's so much that we can do with technology and so many types of new businesses we could start whose scripts didn't exist about 10, 15 years ago. So I guess that's where it comes from. But then talk to me about the idea of wanting to start a business and, you know, I don't want to do much. I just want to do a little bit, make good money and be fine. And the real experience of being an entrepreneur. So what was the thinking going into it? And today, is that still the same, or did you find some rude awakening in the process?
I wouldn't say it was a rude awakening. I think going into it, you are somewhat prepared for this is going to be hard work, but you go into it with a thought that it's going to be difficult now in order for it to be easier later. So for me, it was every day picking, packing, obviously doing it from my bedroom, making the jewelry at the time, all the marketing, everything pretty much, because you wear all the hats when you first start a business. But gradually, as I'm getting into it, we make more income. Okay, you hire a specialist. Okay, you hire someone to pack the parcels. Like that was my thought process of, okay, it's not going to be great right now, but it will be. And I always feel that way. And as much as we grow and as much as we expand, I always find another way to be lazy, like every single time. It's like, what am I doing right now that I'm like, I don't want to do it. What can I do to not do it, you know? It's like finding solutions for your problems is kind of what I wasn't so good at when I first started. Because I would just think, oh, okay, no, it's fine, I'll do it. Or you know, this is not a problem, but it would be a problem. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I totally get it. Because I think that one of the things that a lot of people miss is the fact that with all the options that technology presents to us today, there's so many things that used to feel like huge parts of the business, like major work that you have to do as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
A lot of those things have been simplified with technology, only if you are diligent enough to learn the technology and to automate those processes, because then, like you said, it's finding new ways to be lazy.
Yeah.
This used to take up a lot of my time. Now I'm looking for new technologies that can simplify that so that I could focus on the things that are more important. Which leads me to my next question, which is around, what are the things that you think that Gen Z entrepreneurs find almost natural, they take to it naturally, that a lot of older generation entrepreneurs need to pay more attention to?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So 2 things that come to mind straight away. Social media, first of all, and also AI. And I think both sound really daunting, really scary to people who are like my parents' age, or, you know, they just think, what? Like, I've no idea what either of those 2 things are. Social media has been incredible for my business. It's been incredible for my personal brand. It got me where I am. And it's like, somewhat free. I know people say it's free organic exposure, but obviously you put the time and the effort into it. But it's like you can have results that you couldn't imagine you could have with paid advertisement. Social media, if you have a business and you are not on social media, you're making a huge mistake. Any type of business, like I know solicitors who've got a firm, and they're on TikTok and they're giving free advice. Or for us, it's like we have our jewelry and we show what it's like and we show styling it so people can see what it looks like on. There are so many ways to utilize social media, and there are so many platforms that I know it can feel overwhelming, but just pick one and just get on it. Like I feel like every single person we've had this conversation, like this is what I do to everyone. I make everybody use social media because it's such a great tool. And I think it's severely underrated in the older generations.
I think so too, because it's come along really well, and it's really, really become a key platform through which businesses can reach new audiences, communicate effectively, and make money. And speaking of which, let's dig a bit into that. Is TikTok still the social media app for dancing 13-year-olds?
Absolutely not. And it hasn't been for a long time. I joined TikTok early 2019, kind of. So from then, that's where it really started expanding. Like I was in just as it was kind of changing. And I think businesses really started to take advantage of it. People with personal brands grew to like millions and millions of followers during lockdown, all off the back of just posting videos. And as much as people will look at it, it's like, oh, like dancing. My For You page doesn't have a single dancer on it. And it's very niche. The algorithm is amazing. It really puts you in front of the right people. And it's like, there's such a smart software behind it that it's just silly if you don't take advantage if you're not on the app. Because if I like, for example, my personal brand, I post business tips, mindfulness, entrepreneurship, all that kind of stuff. So that's all I see. And all the people that see my videos, that's what they want to see. That's why they're being shown it. But if they want to see dance videos, they wouldn't see my videos. Do you know what I mean? It's all sectioned off kind of thing. Like, yeah, you can go and search those dance videos if you want to, but if you haven't kind of trained your TikTok to be showing you that, you won't see it.
Absolutely, and I think that's very instrumental, particularly for entrepreneurs, millennials, baby boomers, or whatever generation it is that you identify as. There's so much happening, particularly with a platform like TikTok that we've just talked about. There is so much happening to the degree that even the biggest businesses in the world, biggest business influencers in the world now have TikTok accounts, and they have massive following on there.
Yeah.
Have you seen the same trend?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's quite a trend of hustle culture at the moment, and very much business-mindedness, entrepreneurship. I think since lockdown, there was a massive rise in entrepreneurship, and that's translated into social media with so many business-based accounts growing huge followings.
Absolutely. And I think that the key word there is distribution. Yeah. Because distribution is one of the key things in business. And what it does is it allows you to take your products or your service and take it to new heights, new customers, people that you never, ever would have been able to interact with directly. I think it's really phenomenal. And thank you for being one of the people that keep pushing that frontier and getting everybody to wake up.
Get everybody on TikTok.
All right, let's switch gears a bit and go to one thing that I think is very, very fascinating. I was taken slightly aback when you told me that Lord Sugar was your business partner. And I think one of the first questions that I asked is, did you participate in The Apprentice? So you weren't a part of The Apprentice. How is it that you got this man to become this massive celebrity entrepreneur to become, your business partner? Tell us the story. We want the scoop.
I don't know. You know what? People always ask me this question. It's like, I actually just don't know how I did it. I just sent a couple of emails, and I really kind of...
A couple of emails? How many emails?
Quite a few emails. I just was like this crazy lady, like I want to talk to him, and somehow I managed to get through. And then he was like, come down to Loughton, like let's meet. And then I went and walked over for the investment.
Interesting. So it happened in one meeting?
Yeah. I met him once, yeah. Well, the first time I met him, yeah.
Interesting. And how old were you when this happened?
I was, I think 18 when I started to... I was 19 when I got the investment.
You were 19 when you got the investment?
Yeah.
And how's that, business partnership been? How's that relationship been? Do you guys talk all the time? How does that evolve?
Bessies. No, I think it's really early days. It's really early days. I think I'm barely 2 years in, and it's been a journey for sure. It's been a lot of development and a lot of kind of spending the investment on trying to figure out what works, because it was very different when it was just me, and the processes were different, the way that we do things are different, the systems were different, and kind of having them on board has been quite a bit of an adjustment. And also, it's given me the chance to be able to invest the money in things that are like, you know, paid ads or machinery and things like that, which I wouldn't have done before. So I think, I don't know, it's been a journey, and it's one that I'm still on, and it's you know, work in progress.
So exploring growth possibilities.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that sticks out for me in that story is the fearlessness or audacity that I think is a major trait and a very positive one that new generation entrepreneurs seem to have. Because, you know, for my generation, for example, we were schooled in the process of, you know, you've got to be very cautious, you've got to be very, but I think there's an audacity, which is a very, very good thing for younger entrepreneurs. And one of the other things that I wanted to touch on is, you know, you've had this engagement with him, and I'm sure that you probably have other people, you know, that you've learned from in business. Talk to me about the role of mentorship as a young entrepreneur.
So I think, like what you said as well, it ties in with this sense of shamelessness. I don't have a fear of approaching anyone to ask for help, and I like to, it sounds silly, but I like to be the dumbest person in the room, if you know what I mean. I like to know the least, because I am open to absorb from anywhere and everywhere. I learn new things every day. I absorb so much from so many different people that I never sort of had just the one mentor. I just kind of, like, you know, look at the world as my mentor, you know what I mean? You kind of just take everything from everywhere. You're listening on everything. Whatever anyone's got to say, you hear them out. And that's kind of how I incorporated mentorship into my life. And with obviously having the partnership, I have access to them. I have access to their team of accountants and like finance people, and, you know, numbers stuff and boring stuff I can learn from them, and everything else, like anybody, I learn it from pretty much.
Absolutely. Mentorship, very, very important. And I'm glad that, you know, that has come through with your story as well. Let's talk very quickly as we begin to wrap up about your business. So you've told us that it's a jewelry business.
Yeah.
If you were to describe the uniqueness of the business today, you know, what is it that you're going to say? What's unique about Trésor?
So it's jewellery that looks and acts like real gold. So you can wear it in the shower, the beach, the pool, wherever you want to wear it. And it doesn't do, well, you probably won't understand, but when you're a girl, you love jewellery, you love sparkly things, right? But sometimes you go out and you buy some jewellery and you sweat a little bit and it leaves a nasty green mark on your finger, or it might stain your skin. Or if it's got really horrible materials, it'll give you a rash and you'll have an allergic reaction. My jewellery is made to combat pretty much all of that. It's made to be worn. It doesn't give you those nasty green marks. It doesn't fade. It stays golden for like up to 3 years. And it's pretty much, you know, the most durable, the best quality, the most luxurious at the best prices. Everything is super affordable.
Fantastic. And where for those that are watching, where can they find you?
You can find us at Shop Trésor on all social media platforms, and also shoptresor.co.uk.
Okay, the last question I'm going to ask you before I let you go. If you could go back and do it all over again, what would you do differently?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You know what? You know, I feel like it's silly, but entrepreneurs, actually, we love the struggle. Like, we love it, because I feel like there's no other way to learn. We don't learn traditionally. I'm a dropout. I didn't finish uni. I couldn't learn that way. I couldn't learn from a book. And my mum, my whole life, has always said that you just learn from doing what you're told not to do anyway. So just go and do something and learn from it that way. And I think that's, you know, that's just how I've done it, and I wouldn't change a thing. Even though there's been times where it's super difficult, I know that all of those things have led me to the point where I'm at now, and I wouldn't be at the point where I'm at now if I hadn't made all those mistakes. You know?
Fantastic. I think that's a fantastic place to wrap up this segment of the show. It's been a very, very interesting conversation, Amani. It's great to have you, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Stay tuned. We've got more to come.
Birmingham-based land promoter Richborough Estates has launched a new commercial division to meet demand for consented land for business use. Nick Jones has been appointed Group Director of the division, moving from his role as Midlands Regional Director. Accountancy giant EY has strengthened its private team in the Midlands with the appointment of new director Anisha Patel. Anisha has over 8 years' experience working in mergers and acquisitions and growth capital markets, and she joins from BGF, a growth capital investor. Environmental consultants Tyler Grange have partnered with Hockley's Burning Soul Brewery to launch 2 seasonal low-carbon and environmentally conscious beers, Bramble and Solstice, both of which are brewed for purpose and not for profit.
Now, if you were ever wondering what the view of Birmingham city centre looked like from the top of a 35-storey building, well, you're in luck, because that's exactly where we are. The building is called The Square. It's at the top of Broad Street, not far from Five Ways, and it is very near to completion. I have three gentlemen with me here who are going to talk about various different aspects of property. We have Sam Ginder, we have Alex Tross and Ben Davidson. Let me start with you, Sam, because you're part of the company's various organisations that are involved in this project, aren't you? So just tell us a bit about you, the company, and this place we're at today.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sam Ginder. I'm the founder of Future High Street Living, and we are pleased to be part of such a significant development. The Square, we acquired the site back in 2020 and navigated it through the planning process. This will be an exceptional 440 unit build to rent apartment scheme that we're delivering for our capital partner Cortland, and we are topping out next week in the week, which is amazing, which is excellent, and practical completion will be February 2024, and we are well on track to do so.
So where we're standing here at the moment will be what?
This will be the outdoor amenity area. Our residents will enjoy panoramic views of the city. You can see behind us we've got the Edgbaston reservoir. Behind us we have the central business district, and you can also get views of the Malvern Hills that way.
It's amazing, it's amazing. What was here before then, before you started building here?
This was an old office, two-storey office building that was here for many, many years.
And given that then the planning for this started before COVID, before what we've all been through for the last 2 or 3 years, have you had to tweak the plans, adjust the plans as a result of people's lifestyles changing?
Our vision for the site has remained as such, and we always knew that it warranted a tall building, and obviously given the shortage of brownfield sites in the city centre, there's only one way to go, and that's up. But obviously tweaking the plans, yes, because we submitted during the pandemic. Coming out of the pandemic, the lessons we've learned, we've obviously tweaked the amenity to increase the size of the amenity, because obviously our exceptional spaces ethos is as such to create environments where people want to live, work and play all in one place.
And it's a bit of a competition going on at the moment about what's the tallest building in Birmingham, isn't it? Where are we in the league table? Second, something like that? Third at the moment?
Currently, at present, as we stand today, we're second. Moulder, the Mercian, as you can just see there, completed at 42 stories. We're 35 here, but obviously given the altitude, we are just below them in terms of height.
We'll talk a bit more about it specifically in a few minutes.
Sure.
But I want to come to Alex and Ben. You're very much looking at it from a residential point of view, from a commercial point of view. Alex, how do you feel about how confident, how vibrant Birmingham is? I mean, to me, every time you come into the city centre, there's new cranes, there's new developments, there's new ideas. It's all happening still, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I think obviously on the back of the Commonwealth Games, which is obviously a massive success and had lots of eyeballs in the city, and we're able to showcase the excellent sort of fundamentals that Birmingham has, which has been the driver for both regional consolidation and inward investment, and we think that trend's going to continue. As a market, we use a barometer for sort of success and performance, which is take-up, which is the amount of square feet let. And actually Q4 last year was 31% ahead of Q4 the previous year, so that trajectory is still very positive. We see rents have gone up despite the challenges of the pandemic and sort of the wider economic sort of headwinds, which unlocks appraisals, which encourages development. And actually very similar to what Sam mentioned, that people want quality buildings now. They want quality office space when they have to endure the commute. They want something at the end of that commute which is worthwhile. So amenity is huge in terms of what is driving that interest, and that flight to quality is very much part of that Birmingham narrative now. So despite the conversations around recession and those challenges, actually on the ground it still feels very positive. Lots of inquiries, lots of conversations about taking space.
And when you say we, and you're talking earlier, just tell us a bit about the various hats you wear.
Right, so the day job is I'm commercial director at Centric, and I run the commercial agency within the wider property group. That team that I head is both valuation and also agency, office agency, which is my sort of day-to-day, but also retail, some land and some industrial as well. In addition to which I'm deputy chair of Cornwall Bid, so I'm an ambassador for the city and try to drive interest in the city by connecting both the business community and sort of F&B and leisure offer as well. So make sure that ecosystem flourishes to get everyone's eyeballs remaining on Birmingham.
So you must love the fact that you've got something like this sprouting up, which is a bit different, it's iconic, it's eye-catching, it gets people talking about Birmingham, doesn't it?
Listen, absolutely. The more we can do to keep Birmingham in people's mind, I'm happy to support. So, as I said, it's an ecosystem, so the residential element has to work and flourish, as does the commercial, as does the F&B, and once we can support all of those, then Birmingham as a whole will prosper, and that's very much a passion of mine.
And Ben, from the residential point of view, tell us a bit about you, your business, what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Ben Davidson, founder of Davidson Estates. I head up the whole company based on Cornwall Row office. We've got an office in Edgbaston as well.
You can see both your offices from here, can't you?
You can, yeah, definitely, yeah. Took photos already. But yeah, I head up the new homes department as well in Cornwall Row. My main role is business development for the company though.
So would you echo, what Alex was saying there in terms of confidence at the moment in the market? Because residential, we had another interest rate rise last week, which is 10th in a row. Yeah. That must dent some people's confidence in terms of buying, must it?
It does, yeah. I mean, when it comes to mortgages, it's just education, really. I mean, speak to your mortgage advisor. I think out there at the moment, people think that they can get a type of mortgage that they actually can't, because especially if you're buying an investment property as well for a company, the deposit that you need to put down now isn't 25% anymore. It's probably more towards the 40%. So not a lot of people do know that, and that's only come into fruition really over the last month or so. So it is all about education at the moment. So when you're speaking to somebody, you need to go a bit more into detail as to how you're going to afford this.
How different is your working life now then compared to maybe what it was like before the pandemic? Are there different strengths? Are there different weaknesses?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is different. I mean, in the pandemic, there was an exodus, wasn't there, from the city, in every city, going out to the suburbs, one in an office space, one in outside space. Obviously, not every development can provide that. I think since the pandemic, developers such as Sam's has learned from that, and the fact that they need to provide the best kind of amenities outside space, and people will pay for that. I think there still is that little thing in the back of everyone's mind. What if there is another pandemic? If you're in Sam's building, you'll be fine. But there's a lot of other developments that you'd still struggle and you'd probably want to move out. But in line with what Alex was saying, really, I think it's all together. I mean, commercial, residential, build to rent, it's all the same. We need every single sector needs to perform, so Birmingham can flourish.
And Sam, I mean, the one thing about standing 35 stories up is it's a little bit of a different kind of environment, hence the slightly larger microphone that we need up here to battle with the elements. That what Ben says really there is what you're all about here, isn't it? Making this a bit of a sort of self-contained little ecosystem all of its own.
It's a community in itself. Yeah. We're delivering a number of schemes across Birmingham, and when we are even putting pen to paper and designing our developments, it's all about making inclusive communities, health and well-being at the focus of the scheme, and ensuring that they're future-proofed, because there's going to be quite a number of these high-profile build-to-rent schemes coming forward. But ultimately, we need to keep the attraction of the scheme for some longevity and keeping our residents in situ.
I don't think I've ever been this close to the top of a crane ever, actually. But
it's 120 metres high now.
I don't want to know that. I don't want to know about how high it is. We just don't dwell on those sort of things. Give us an idea of the perspective of the project. How many people work on it? How much has it cost? How long has it been going on for?
Yeah, well, the project has now been on site for 18 months. There's another 12 months to go, and obviously exceptionally well to be topping out next week. We'll be completing the project in February 2024. As it stands today, there are roughly about 250 bodies on site. That will start to ramp up once topping out is done, and we start to do the internals at 300 bodies a day. So that gives you the kind of idea of how many staff are on board here to successfully get this completed in time.
So it's providing work for a lot of local trades, isn't it, as well?
Absolutely, yeah. It's great for the local subcontractors, the local suppliers, and obviously the local employment levels.
Alex, what do you see as maybe some of the biggest opportunities and challenges in the marketplace in Birmingham at the moment? Are there things that you think maybe we should be doing better, should be doing quicker, should be doing differently maybe?
It's a good question. I think ultimately what Birmingham needs to do more of is really shout about how great Birmingham is. I think we sort of historically have prided ourselves about being self-deprecating and humble and what have you, but ultimately I think we've got a wonderful story to tell, and we should really be telling it much more loudly and much more often.
Agreed.
I think, as mentioned before, we've had the Commonwealth Games, we're going to get the European Championships in 26, but actually...
Over there,
absolutely, we can see that, yeah. Nice segue. But I think that there's a gap between those two things that we can't afford to get complacent in. So that narrative now is really quite compelling. You know, most investable, 5G test bed, HS2's coming, all the wonderful things that we all know as Brummies and celebrate, but actually what we should be doing is telling the world and the region and the country about those things so we can continue that trend of inward investment and, as I say, keep Birmingham in everyone's mind. So a bit more sort of being a bit more vocal about our strengths, I would like to see, but also continuing that trend of excellence in terms of what we bring forward in terms of our buildings. And ultimately that will start being the thing that Birmingham becomes renowned for, and that can't hurt.
Do you think there's a lot of things which maybe we take for granted here in terms of access to infrastructure, technology, transport links, and we don't realise just what strengths they actually are for this city?
Without a doubt. I think, as I said, Brummies know it and understand it. I think what we haven't done enough of is tell everybody else. And I think the more that we can do that, the more that people understand the value of being in Birmingham. Because we, again, beyond more miles of canal than Venice, for example, which often gets trotted out, but that's a great thing to have, but it's not why people come. There's a lot more besides. I think our regional economy is worth about 1.2 billion. And sort of component parts of that, I don't think people understand enough. And I think we just need to, as a collective, talk more about that and showcase our wonderful city.
And Ben, we were just saying when we first came up on top of the roof here, as well as the miles of canal that you can see, you don't quite realise just how green this place actually is as well. From a marketing point of view, residentially, what are the things that you sell Birmingham as most?
Well, Edgbaston, that road down there is where the trees begin, and that's the slogan for Edgbaston really, because if you look that way, you don't see any houses. You know, the Cowthorpe estate never had any industrial or warehouse units over there, so it's all houses and mansions, and that's where our head office is. So we know the area very well. But if you look off the building here, it's just literally trees. You look the other way, and it's tall buildings. So I think, yeah, it's a tricky one, but I think they're so different, both areas, and they're so close, just over one road. Yeah, it's an incredible city to be in.
What are the big opportunities from your point of view? A little bit similar question to the one I asked Alex, really, from a residential point of view. Where do you see things going? What are the trends telling you? Are people as nervous as maybe the media sometimes lead us to believe that they are at the moment, do you think?
I think Birmingham's the next place to be, definitely. I think it has been for a long time. You know, Manchester, the dirty word Manchester, has been ahead of us for a decade now. We've just got our tram in, and it's such a good link from Edgbaston all the way through the city centre. You can go to Wolverhampton, you can go to West Brom.
Came in on it this morning.
Oh, did you? Yeah. So we've got these links now. You've always got London, but I think Birmingham is now living up to being the second city.
So Sam, what's next then from your point of view? This one's been 4 or 5 years in the planning. You must already be hatching plans for what's coming next even before this one's finished.
Yeah, absolutely. Watch this space. There's a number of other developments that have pepper potted around the city. We've got a site in Digbeth, we've got in Gun Quarter, we've got another one coming on the south side. So, there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes. And collectively there's another 2,500-3,000 units that the group will be delivering.
Same kind of units as this then, is that?
Yeah, well, obviously not as tall as this, but there's going to be some high profile developments as such to quantify the same amount of units and numbers for the build to rent and residential sector. Much needed homes that are needed here. You mentioned whether the market can handle it of such, and what the futures of the trends are. The infrastructures that are being put in place for HS2 are fantastic for the region, and that's only going to drive and put more pressure on the housing stock in Birmingham. You're going to see a lot of influx from people living down south that will want to shoot up and start living in Birmingham, purely from the cost of living perspective. And once that starts to happen, then there's going to be a huge shortage on housing in the CBD again.
Yeah, and Alex, I guess a side effect from that is the balance of the city centre is traditionally going to be far more residential as well as commercial, where maybe it's been more commercially weighted in the past.
Yeah, I think so, but I think that blend is positive. I think when people come into the city, they want to obviously work, but they want to socialise. I think that's the bit that people missed the most during the lockdown sort of period. So the more diverse city centre we can offer, I think the better the experience is going to be, and that experience is what draws people in, not only to work, but as Sam mentioned, to play as well.
How tall do you think we can go then, Ben? How tall would you like
tall
to
is
come
Alex?
onto it? It's Alex. He's a couple of stories higher. He's a couple of stories higher than the rest of us already. But
well, we know that there's a lot of planning permission approved throughout the city. I think there's one for 61 floors at the moment. Sam will know more than me on that. So there's a lot in the pipeline, put it that way. Planning permission is being approved. You know, the council want a lot more residential. We need a lot more residential throughout.
And they say, don't they, you know, the health of the residential market and people who are working in the property sector tend to be the ones that get a clearer and an earlier guide of just how confident we actually are in the economy. So, you know, what's your view at the moment? Are we good? How far ahead are you looking at the moment?
Economy-wise, personally, I think it's so difficult to say. HS2's been the drag really for the last 10, 12, 15 years. I know there's a big delay on it again, and I think that's why a lot of developers are holding off. I can't remember what it is now, it's 2033, but I think HS2 is the key to everything that we have here. Sam alluded to it earlier, people will live here and work in London. They will do it. And we're already seeing that come in here. You know, all the big corporate companies are here now as well, a lot of them. You know, BT, Goldman Sachs. You know, Alex will know a lot more of them. So, yeah, again, I think what Alex was saying earlier, just we need to shout out a bit more about Birmingham.
I guess though, Alex, we don't want too many people living here and working elsewhere, because we need the good people to be working for companies right here in the city, don't we?
We do, absolutely do. There's always that risk of brain drain, but I think in reality, that makes it more incumbent on us to make Birmingham the place to be. So actually people want to come back. And actually we're already the number one destination for people coming out of London. So I think the more of that we can do, the better. But I think as long as we can just make sure we do what we need to do well, people will stay. We'll lose some, and good luck to them, but there's plenty left.
Well, we're a flexible workforce these days, aren't we? So
Absolutely.
What do you think the biggest misconception of Birmingham is at the moment?
I think people don't realise how varied the offer is, and that's in terms of the buildings, the resi and the F&B. I think people historically have thought about maybe the Spaghetti Junction and the Black Country and things that perhaps aren't as sophisticated as perhaps Birmingham really is. And I think that's changing, slowly but surely. When people come to the city, people are still surprised. We had lots of conversations last summer where people will go, I didn't realise this is what you could offer. You know, we've got an incredible public realm now, thanks to Paradise, for example. It's a true European quality environment, and those things I'm not sure people were aware of enough prior, but it's changing.
Thank you for your property perspective, gentlemen, much appreciated. I started with Sam, so I'm going to finish with Sam. I've got two questions for you. One, when will people be able to reserve their particular plot in this building? That's the first one.
The letting up will begin at least 4 to 6 months prior to practical completion, and our obviously capital partner Cortland will be obviously coming to the market at the correct time with that.
And the second one, most importantly, you've cased the joint now, you've been to all corners. Where's the best view?
It's got to be there.
Which one's that one that's over? So we're over...
Malvern. Sorry, Malvern's that way.
Malvern Hills behind
yeah,
me.
it's that one. Sorry, beg your pardon.
Final answer?
Final answer, Malvern Hills.
Excellent. Thanks. I'm glad we brought the sunshine today, particularly seeing as I didn't bring my coat with me. Thanks for the chat. It's been great. Thank you very much, James. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joining me in the studio right now are two incredible entrepreneurs that do a lot of important work in the area of well-being. I've got Asha Ghosh and I've got Connor McManus in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great to have you here. So we've got an interesting conversation to have around the subject matter of well-being. I look forward to it. But first of all, I want to hear about you guys. So what's your business? Asha, let's start with you.
My business is called The Honest Partnership. I am a leadership coach, and my primary thing is I enable women and senior professional women to unleash potential that they haven't untapped before, so that they can lead, inspire, and I've always said to be the leaders that we've never had, and so that they can take their teams, their business, and their lives as well to find joy and satisfaction.
That is interesting. I mean, that's what we want to hear, particularly on this segment, because I think you're going to bring a lot of great perspective to this conversation. Connor, how about you? Tell us about your business.
So, my name's Connor McManus. I'm the founder of a business called The Collective, and we're a digital health organisation, and we partner with other organisations to support their team. So, to keep it nice and simple, we have a team of personal trainers, physiotherapists, nutritionists, and therapists who look after, in a one-on-one coaching format, the employees of organisations. So like, as you know, and as the conversation is about today, it's a massive talking point at the moment. And we go straight to the source. We provide employees with the support they need directly from the person that they need, given their particular problem, challenge, or their goal at that moment in time.
Fantastic. So let's get right into the conversation. Wellness. What does it mean?
I think there's lots of connotations about what it means. And I think one step back is actually mental health, because they're interconnected. And the World Health Organization talks about mental health being when somebody isn't physically ill, but they actually have the agency to reach their own potential, and for themselves, their families, and their kind of community. And where well-being comes in is, like, Gallup did last year a poll about what they understood it to be, and they had like kind of 5 areas, and it was sort of like physical kind of well-being, financial well-being, your environment, how your community, as well as your personal and mental health. And so when we start looking at that, it's actually quite a complex thing, and it's a word that gets used quite a lot, but I don't think it's always fully realised and fully understood, which is why I wanted to take a step back, because when somebody is happy and healthy, one area of their life could still be quite challenging. So, and I think that's where the complexity comes in.
And I think that's quite interesting, which is why, kind of in your instance, you've literally taken the word well-being, looked at all the different connotation, and built a business around a segment of it. What does well-being mean for you?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, right? Like you said, like the word, like wellness, well-being, both the words have got a lot of mileage, and they both mean a lot of different things to different people. The way, like, there's 2 great ways of explaining it that I've heard. I'll try and relay both to you, and you can like work out, and the audience can work out whichever they think is best for them. So there's a spectrum of wellness. So if you imagine on the far left-hand side, you've got illness, and the far right-hand side, you've got fitness, and the middle, you've got wellness. So you can, as an individual, sit somewhere on that spectrum. If you consider yourself to be in great shape, both physically and mentally, you'll be more towards the fitness side. You'll have great physical fitness and great mental fitness. And if you consider yourself to be not so strong in certain areas, you'll be leaning more towards the illness side. And that's where we start to see people starting on that patient journey where they need to go to the GP and so on and so forth. The other analogy that we use, which I use more often, which I think is great, is like your wellness is like a bit at the table, and you've got your different legs of that table. So one of the legs is your recovery. One of the legs is your mental health. One of it is how much you exercise. One is your diet. And then if you start to pull away those legs, or if they're weak, eventually, if you pull enough of those legs away, the table will topple over. And that's how, like, the table is your wellness, right? If you've got a good, strong base for all of them, your table is in great shape. But if you start struggling in certain areas, eventually your overall wellness is going to topple over.
I totally agree that is one of the most amazing analogies I've heard to literally describe this concept of wellness. Now, let's begin to narrow down a bit. We want to focus on wellness in the workplace. In the context of working and professional life and life as entrepreneurs and business people, what have you seen in terms of the trends concerning wellness, whether that be from a problem standpoint or from a solution standpoint?
I think it's quite different for lots of different people. What you're saying there is, and the word spectrum is exactly the right terminology, because people can experience low levels of stress if they, for example, want to change their job and they feel that there's a risk in their lives, or they're going for a promotion. There is a level of pressure. That's what the initial part of stress is, a pressure. And then as you sort of move along the spectrum, then that pressure kind of builds up. And it might be that, an example I had last week was when somebody wasn't getting the promotion that they wanted, and they didn't understand, and it was starting to actually manifest in them into not being able to sleep, and then actually their physical well-being then goes down. They can't look after their families, they're not eating well, and that starts to build into anxiety, where actually you worry and you start to kind of feel much more, and those feelings cut out your ability to be productive, and then that sort of challenges you.
You've got that snowball effect.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
you just graduate if you don't pay attention to it. What about you, Connor? What have you seen in that dimension? Wellness in the workplace?
Again, it's a tricky one, right? Like, it's such a broad subject. I think the simplest way that like we try and look at it is that the workplace predominantly, if it's going to have a negative effect on wellness, it's going to be your mental health, because in the majority of workplaces, not all, but in the majority of workplaces, the pressure, the stress, the weight will come in like a psychological format. You know, there aren't that many jobs left out there now where we're asking people to work like 12, 14 hours days in physical environments. So then that means the support we need to be putting in place is related to mental health. Like, what support mechanisms can we put in place that's going to protect people from that rising stress input? So we need to have the support mechanism for the stress output, like around mental health. However, there's a problem with that. The problem is that we now know that mental health and physical health is really connected. So if the outcome of physical health and mental health is connected, then the inputs that we put in place, the support mechanisms, also need to be physical and mental health. And this is where it gets complicated. We end up just going around in circles. But ultimately, like, our perspective is that, forgetting about the workplace for a moment, like if you have an individual and you want to support them with their overall well-being, what mechanisms would you put in place? You'd put in support around that, like their exercise and their diet and their mental health. Yep. So in reality, like, a business is just made up of many individuals. Yep. So you just put the same mechanisms in place, but you do it for all the individuals at scale.
It's quite interesting when you look at all the different verticals that has to be taken care of in order to consider, a person to be well, or consider an organization to be one that have put in place the infrastructure that is required to keep, the employees in very good shape. The question that I have, then I'm going to start back with you, Connor, on this one, is whose responsibility is it? Right? Is it the employee's responsibility, or is it the employer's responsibility?
It's both, right? Because, like, we want to have a body, and it's our responsibility to look after that body. Otherwise, as we get into later stages of life, things start to go wrong, and we don't want to do that. So we need to think forwards. It's like a savings account. The more you invest into it now, the more you benefit from it in the future. However, from like a productivity standpoint, like, there's very little argument against the fact now that, like, if people are healthier, they are more productive. If people are more productive, the organization benefits. There is like a caveat to that, and that is, like, we're in a cost of living crisis, as we all know. So if you can alleviate the disposable income burden of spending your disposable income on physical and mental health product support, expert support, so on and so forth, by you as an organization paying for them, then, like, it's double-sided, right? Like, they're going to be more productive, and it's a benefit to the employee because it's another reason for them to work at your organization.
Interesting. And what are your thoughts on that, Asha?
I'm going to challenge part of it.
Ooh, great. This is what I love.
Not because I disagree with actually what you're saying is the business model you have doesn't necessarily need to look at the organizational structure. It doesn't need to look at the culture. It just doesn't have to. That's so it's not part of your business need. But actually, when you're team coaching, I've had a conversation with a client recently, and they have a team of 8, and 70% of them have mental health issues. And I think most of them are actually on antidepressants in some shape or form, or some sort of, and one of them has a psychosis. Where does the burden end for them? And actually, as a leader, because I've been coaching the team and the leader themselves, there is this tension between them of, actually, the sole responsibility of me is keeping this team together. And where the organizational challenge comes in is when we're looking at it systemically, which is you would look in team coaching, is What's around that team? Well, it's a culture that actually puts pressure in a particular way. The actual organisational structure is quite hierarchical, and so people don't feel they can voice their concerns in the way, so they don't have psychological safety. The team structure itself by no means anyone's fault, is just sort of sat in this giant pyramid scheme where they don't feel they have an automated kind of pressure. And then if you then have poor leadership, a client I spoke to on Friday genuinely said the toxicity in her team was unreal, and she felt the need to protect, almost put like a band in front of them. So she was fronting the toxicity with the
And
fear.
taking it on.
Yes. So, but then her mental health was being challenged, and how that was manifesting is she couldn't really, when she got home, she couldn't look after her children. She was absolutely shattered.
And I think like that's a valid point, right? So I think like there are certain workplaces where the weight of the environment, the culture, the toxicity, the pressure, the stress is so large that there are no mechanisms you can put in place that's going to combat that. So then like, when that happens, like, yeah, you're right, like it's just an organisational
It's a
burden.
cultural
Like,
problem.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's a big problem to have, right?
if HR isn't there and they haven't got, and HR can be an amazing thing, it can have lots of different functions and facets, but if HR isn't sort of able to influence the policy or have or get a strategy that runs all the way through the organisation rather than just being a vertical of like we support it, it has to be a silver lining that's through it, then you have real challenges, because occupational health and HR are kind of the last thing. It's a tick box kind of exercise, and part of my job is sort of like the stopgap of when people are actually no longer, the pressure's too much and I no longer have anyone in that environment to enable me.
So that essentially calls into question what business leaders are doing in order to, look at the internal culture that they've got to make sure that it is an enabling environment for the employees to be productive. So that's great. But how about instances where, because we talk about stress, anxiety, and mental health issues and things of that nature, it's not always, those pressures don't always come from the workplace. Yes, everybody works, they belong to one organization or the other to certain degrees, but some of these pressures could be pressures that have come from personal life, personal instances, marriages, children, education, all sort of different things that could potentially happen in life. To what degree is it incumbent on the businesses to make sure that, regardless of where the pressure is coming from, the business bears the responsibility of taking care of the people?
I mean, that is the question that I've just posed, but that my client has. I don't think there's a simple yes/no type of boxed up answer that you can have there. For each life stage that we have, various different things happen. So, for example, at the moment, I've got women who are perimenopausal or menopausal. They're also, at the same time, they've got elderly parents and they've got teenage children. I mean, that in itself, and they've got a high pressure job. That in itself is just like, and the pressure is coming from a lot. And so who owns that bonus, that onus in there is quite difficult. Back to where your sort of service becomes brilliant is that sometimes it takes the pressure of having to think away, and somebody else takes, in the same way as I do, is I'm now partnering with somebody, and some of that pressure can be taken away. And in just taking away something like, actually I can feel a bit fitter, or I can having proper sleep, is the start of them being able to deal with all aspects of that. So, but back to so that I see is a great connection for whole organisations. But back to whose responsibility it is, I don't think there's an answer. So, I know I'm taking over, but I spoke to somebody from the police force last week, and they're talking about, and you were saying about physical. It can be something like not getting their holiday signed off, and then they're completely like, but actually it's a long history of all sorts that have happened, and this is the thing that sort of breaks the camel's back, if you like. So I don't think it's as simple. It depends how it happens, how it manifests, and how it appears.
It is very contextual. And what are your thoughts on that corner in terms of where does that lie, and what should organizations be doing, if anything?
Yeah, like I think I'll keep it really short and simple. I think it's the wrong question. I think like the question is, does it benefit the business to support an individual when they are having their own personal challenges? Like, yeah, of course it does. Like that's removing the whole empathy and compassion part of the equation. From a purely pragmatic standpoint, the business will benefit if the individual is more happy. So it's not their responsibility, but like from a commercial standpoint, it's a great decision.
It makes business sense.
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly.
Now, there's an interesting point I want to pick up on based on what you've just talked about. You know, when we have these conversations, the picture in our mind for the most part are always, you know, businesses that are established, they're doing really well, you know, they've got like a good amount of staff and they've got the resources to take care of them. But that is not the majority of businesses. Most businesses are small businesses trying to make it work one way or the other. And the more we have this conversation, and it's great that we're having this conversation about the need for proper, you know, mental health support for employees. But to some entrepreneurs that are not as big, you know, these are literally small businesses, medium-sized businesses. For them, it becomes a question of how much more do we need to spend on these people? You know, because we're paying them already, we're paying taxes, we're paying insurance, we're paying all those things on behalf of our employees. Now, there's this responsibility again around mental health. Now, is that a justifiable thinking for small businesses? And if that thought is there, how do they navigate their
It's a tricky one, right? Like there's no right or wrong answer to that. It depends if the business is a startup and like they're trying to grow and expand, because if they are, they may have tons of capital, and investing in their team early is definitely a good decision. If they're just an SME that operates at a low staff level, it depends on their margins and so on and so forth. But there are solutions out there that can put in place. Like, for example, we built part of our service in a way that it can be accessed by smaller businesses, and we charge on a per person basis so that they're not lumped with a massive fee when they haven't got a massive workforce. And so we considered that when we built the business. But I understand the problem. But then you're starting a business, you know what you're getting in for, and that's one of the problems that you're getting in for.
And what are your thoughts on that, Asha?
I mean, going back to organisations themselves, when you set up, you have visions and values of how you want to be and how you want to be treated and how you want to treat other people. And if you start to put profit above that, then you are going to be challenged about how your business is going to grow, how your culture is going to grow, how you are going to be perceived. And so if you kind of start on that mindset where it's becoming more challenging, then I think growth is more difficult, and how you then get loyalty can be more challenging. And in growth, what you need is your people to sort of be there with you and feel your vision, have the purpose with you. And so to feel the financial pain initially, I think is prohibitive and reductive for growth.
It's quite interesting, this conversation, because there's so many different ways we could look at it. Now, think about it in this context. I am a small business owner, and I'm thinking, okay, I've got to hire staff. I want to do right by people. I want to make sure that I take care of the mental health and all this, well-being support for my staff. But I look at the numbers and I say to myself, this is not attainable. Do you think that, and when we take a look at it, actually there's a lot of social attention to the subject matter, so much so that even if it's not convenient for you, you can go out there and say, you know what, I'm not taking care of my employees, let everybody go find their own ways. You can't do that as a business owner. Do you think you would ever get to a point where business owners are just going to say, you know what, I'm not going to hire, I'm just going to look for technological alternatives?
I think it's interesting. I'm not sure whether you want to go all the way there. I've worked in tech, and tech can be incredible for filling certain aspects of your business and providing automation and moving things on. But going back to your original point, should I be thinking in this kind of way? If you as a business owner are thinking about your own mental health, then you are more likely to increase how you are, Absolutely. How you show up for your team, how you prioritize what time you go home from work, when emails are kind of responded to. And if you show that you have hygiene factors, like that you employ somebody like these guys, or actually you have like a health routine and there's healthy food in the fridge and all of those types of things, then it's sort of passing down.
It translates.
Absolutely, it's a ripple effect. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a fair point, right? Like if you're a high performance individual, you want people around you to be high performers. And as a result of that, you'd invest in that process. But I think no, I think that we're only going to move closer and closer and closer towards having healthy workforces. I think well-being has been very guilty of being very ambiguous. So people they feel the pressure, but they don't really know what it looks like. And what I think we've really tried to do is be very candid and very straight to the point and try not to be ambiguous about what we offer.
Great.
And I think as education becomes more so, people can draw the dots between productivity and healthiness, then people will see it like investing in a accountant for your organization because it gets a point where you just can't handle it. There will come a point for you where you have to invest in X solution that's going to help your team be more productive. And I know, again, that's not very like a compassionate way to look at things, but from a commercial standpoint, we're moving closer and closer towards that.
Okay.
And that it's a good long-term strategy.
Absolutely, it definitely is. But then, as a last question, I want to flip very quickly and go to the employee's perspective. Do you think there's ever a point where, you know, people take this too far? Because we've seen instances where companies provide, you know, sleeping areas and games area and lounging areas, and, you know, end up only getting like 3 hours of work in the day from the employees because they're leveraging all this mental well-being, you know, assets that the company has provided. Do you think there's a risk that, you know, sometimes people take this too far, and is there a thing that organizations can do in order to combat that? Do you want to start?
I think, yeah, like, look, I think you see that mostly in the big boys like Google,
the
Facebook,
big
and whatnot. And they've got so much like fat on their business that they can afford to do that, because if one person sleeps all day, then the business isn't going to fall over. Smaller business, that might not be the case. I think that ultimately, no matter what you put in place as an organization, the employee will always have to make the decision. So I think you can't force solutions on your employees because they may not care and they may not be interested in living a healthy lifestyle. So there's definitely opportunities where you can push too much onto your employees because they need to be able to participate and want to participate in the solutions that you provide them. Can it go too far? I don't think you can ever really go too far, but what you can do is try and force something upon your employees and initiatives upon your employees that they don't want and need, or they're just not educated enough about, so they don't know that they want it yet. I think that's definitely a possibility, but you'd rather have too much than too little.
Interesting. And Asha?
I think you kind of, some of these things you kind of have to test out. I know I went to a business meeting a couple of weeks ago and somebody was raving about the fact that they had the initiative they could take as many holidays in the year. My partner works in an agency and they did that for 2 years and no one took any more holiday than they were given. So, and no matter how much education they gave about how that could help you, it just didn't work. So I think some things need to be tested out. Some things kind of work for certain environments, some things don't. Yeah. And it's the purpose of why that's put in place. I think some of these things put the onus on the employee too much as well, to be fit, to be healthy, maybe I don't want to be fit, maybe I don't want to be healthy. Maybe I can be productive without some of those things. Maybe employees shouldn't tell me how to be, but actually if they produce an environment that I feel safe, psychologically safe, and I feel I can use my voice, maybe that will enable me in a different kind of way. So I don't know in that way. And I think if you read some of the reports from Google, I don't think people used a lot. And some of the things were there to actually lessen the amount of hours you went home, like having creches on site is brilliant, but actually there were tech companies encouraging women to freeze eggs and doing all sorts of things so that they would work longer.
So there are limits to how, I mean, essentially, you know, the conversation about mental health and well-being generally in the workplace is not going to end here. It's literally to stimulate more conversation so that you could participate as well. Please make sure that you participate in this conversation, you know, share your thoughts on social media and the rest of those. But I'm going to leave it at that right now because I don't want to take too much of your time. But thank you very much, Connor and Asha, for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for watching. It has been an amazing show today. We've been broadcasting live from the Liquid Media Center right at the heart of Birmingham, and it has been truly remarkable. Remember, you could always catch the show on bbtv.live, and also it's available on YouTube. If you've got questions or you'd like to be a part of the show, feel free to reach out to us. But before we go, we want to get into our 90 seconds with. Who's that going to be with? Stay tuned to find out.
How do you hope your colleagues would describe you?
I think fair, because I think as long as you're fair, that's all you can do, really. So fair and fun to work with.
Your biggest flaw at work?
Probably talking too much and messing around a bit.
What qualities do you look for in colleagues?
Honesty.
The biggest decision you've ever made professionally?
I think probably the decision to start HDY Agency.
Advice you would give to your younger self?
Everything will just work out. Don't stress about it.
Be who you are, be authentic, lean into who you are, and it'll be fine.
The biggest influence on your professional life?
My mum and dad.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird. I did Heart Breakfast for nearly 18 years of 4:30 alarm calls, and I'm still awake at that time.
Gym workout or TV box set?
I'm trying to get better at the gym, so I'm currently going to the gym about 3 or 4 times a week, so I'd have to say gym.
A glass of claret or a spinach smoothie?
Spinach smoothie sounds disgusting, so I'm going to go for a glass of Malbec.
Your guiltiest pleasure?
Probably ice cream. I love ice cream.
Your dream dinner guest, dead or alive?
Frank Sinatra.
Favourite personal possession?
It would be a picture of kids and family.
Your proudest achievement?
Kids, I think. I think once you're a parent, you just realise that that's all that's important.